Simon Marks is on the other side of the Atlantic. LBC's Washington correspondent joins us live. I mean, it's one of those days where I don't know where to start, Simon, so I'll let you decide. I'll delegate in the spirit of Keir Starmer.
Well, James, just on the issue of Seamus Cullerton, to put it into its broader perspective, one of the reasons why the discretion no longer applies in these cases, or is no longer being applied in these cases, is because that for ICE and the Border Patrol, this is now a numbers game in the United States. They are being told by President Trump himself, by Stephen Miller, the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, to accelerate the number of people that are being rounded up and thrown out of the country. And to put the numbers into perspective, Seamus Cullerton is one of more than 69,000 people who are currently in detention across the United States awaiting deportation. And actually, that attorney is lucky that she was able to find him, because all over the country there are lawyers now struggling even to locate their clients in these ICE and Border Patrol facilities nationwide. And plans are being laid, even right here in the Washington, D.C. area, to build more detention centres and camps that the government intends to fill as those mass deportations accelerate. I mean, we've all taken our eyes off Minneapolis. It's now, it was only last month that 2 American citizens lost their lives, I think it is fair to say completely unnecessarily, at the hands of ICE and the Border Patrol in Minneapolis. And there have been these promises to remove 700 immigration agents from the streets. But on the ground in Minneapolis, there is still tremendous fear, particularly among migrant communities and people who are opening the doors of their homes and giving literal house room to people who are afraid to go out on the streets, worried that the remaining more than 2,000 ICE and Border Patrol agents are going to sweep them off those streets. So, we've got to keep very mindful of the unprecedented scale of all of this and the brutality of the treatment. It is fair to say that Barack Obama deported more people than Donald Trump is currently deporting. Obama was always called here the deporter-in-chief. But it's the brutality of all of this that is so different.
Sweet summer child that I am, I was going to ask why they're doing it when the promise was, of course, just to focus upon criminals and gang members and people who eat cats and dogs and various other nonsenses and lies. But, of course, that's why the numbers matter, because they'll claim at some point that all the people they have deported are in those categories, even though they're categorically and demonstrably not, because the truth left the building some time ago. Epstein. We got a Prime Minister, you've probably heard, in all sorts of trouble, despite not being in the files. Donald Trump's regime is full of people who are, including, of course, him. Now, this is a meaningless statistic, but I think people will enjoy it. He appears in it more times than the words Harry Potter appear in all 7 Harry Potter books. But Lutnick is the one probably with the most uncomfortable questions to answer.
Yeah, well, I think it is worth making the point that Donald Trump claims that he's been absolved by the release of those 3 million pages of documents a few days ago. I mean, absolution is still quite a way off for President Trump. There are all sorts of questions swirling, particularly now that we know that in July of 2006, he told the police chief in Palm Beach in Florida that he was delighted that moves were being made against Jeffrey Epstein. Thank goodness you're stopping him. And Trump told the police chief that everybody knew about Epstein's evil antics, and indeed specifically suggested to the police chief, this is according to an interview that the FBI conducted with that former police chief in 2019, told him to keep an eye, to investigate Ghislaine Maxwell. She's the evil one, he said. This is the same President Trump who says that he was completely unaware of anything untoward taking place in Epstein's world, just didn't like him, thought he was, not the right kind of person that he wanted at Mar-a-Lago, and so threw him out of the club. So the White House has got some explaining to do on that. Yesterday, it was Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Well, or not. Yes, exactly. Precisely. They won't be doing any explaining. No, precisely. Exactly. Yesterday, of course, it was Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick who found himself doing some explaining under oath in the Senate. He was testifying before the Appropriations Subcommittee because Howard Lutnick's another one who has said he cut Epstein off as early as 2005, wanted nothing to do with him. But then the documents revealed that actually Lutnick and his entire family and family friends of theirs had lunch with Epstein on Epstein's island in the Caribbean in 2012. And then there was a subsequent meeting with Epstein at his New York home. So there are calls growing for Lutnick either to be fired or to resign. And remember, he's a big deal. He's the big, cocky, garrulous architect of Donald Trump's tariffs policy. He's been one of the architects of Trump's global trade war. At the moment, the White House is circling the wagons and insisting he's staying within the administration. But he's certainly been caught out by the documents release of earlier this month, with every possibility that if more documents come out, there will be more revelations about him and indeed Donald Trump. We have to say both men, of course, deny any wrongdoing.
Yes, although I think Lutnick would be toast under any previous regime for the simple contradiction of his own public claims with regards to contact. And 2012, 4 years after Epstein was convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution. Do you know, somewhat unexpectedly, Charles I popped up in our contemplations earlier today when we were talking about the Epstein impact on the monarchy, on the current King Charles III. So Charles I, if my history is correct, the Civil War, of the many seeds that started the Civil War, it was Charles I trying to use the full force of the law to punish parliamentarians who had said mean things about him or things that he didn't like. Donald Trump is up to similar antics, I think, and has failed so far.
Yes, well, he's trying to via his entirely sycophantic and pliant US attorney here in Washington, D.C., a woman by the name of Jean Pirro, a former judge in Westchester County, New York, but in national terms, much better known as a former vituperative pro-Trump host on Fox News. She was appointed to the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Washington, D.C., and she basically is one of Trump's hatchet people. He says, I think we ought to be pursuing this criminal investigation. She doesn't push back at all. She jumps up, salutes, and says, yes, absolutely. She is the woman who brought the prosecution, the indictment against the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. The White House said it knew nothing of this before suddenly discovering that Jerome Powell was being looked at for possible criminal prosecution over completely trumped up charges relating to the cost of refurbishment work at the Federal Reserve headquarters. Now, Judge Pirro has been unable to secure an indictment before a grand jury here in Washington so that she could prosecute 6 Democrat lawmakers who made a video doing nothing more than telling members of the armed forces here that they should not obey orders that are unlawful. And of course, this was around the time that the National Guard was first being mobilized here in Washington, D.C. There were threats by Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. Those threats still outstanding. Every possibility that he will do it later this year and flood the streets of particularly Democrat-run cities with active duty troops and military personnel. So these 6 Democrat lawmakers put a video together saying to members of the serving military, you know, don't obey orders that are unlawful because you'll be on the hook if you do it. And that was considered seditious treason by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, and the President. And the U.S. Attorney Pirro tried to indict those 6 lawmakers, and the grand jury here was not buying it. This was the same U.S. Attorney's Office that also couldn't get an indictment against a former Department of Justice employee who was fired, and I am not making this up, for throwing a sandwich at federal law enforcement agents on the streets of Washington, D.C. She couldn't get an indictment to prosecute a bloke who had chucked a sandwich at some law enforcement officers, but they are still at it in that US Attorney's office here in Washington.
They're definitely not snowflakes. Finally, and briefly, if you would, because I've got something important up next, something else important up next. I didn't even know we had a special envoy to the UK. I didn't even know Trump had a special envoy to the UK, but he's meeting with the president later today.
Yes, you wouldn't know it because he hasn't done a thing, but this is Mark Burnett, who was the creator of The Apprentice and therefore a good mate of Donald Trump's. Also a man who's sitting on a vast video archive of Donald Trump's that has not been released to the public for curious reasons. Mark Burnett was appointed special envoy, not the same as ambassador. No one really understood what all that meant. He was supposed to build a bridge between Washington and Westminster. If you look at the US Embassy's website in the UK, there is no reference to any activity by Mark Burnett over the last year. He's now told Politico that he has left the diplomatic service. Tonight, he's meeting the president at the White House for a closed-door meeting. It's on the president's schedule. Maybe this is the departure. Yeah. This is the thank you for not doing very much, but we're going to keep an eye on it.
So the mystery, of course, how will we tell whether he's still in the job or not, given how he did when he had it? Simon Marks, thank you very much.